Hello and welcome to today's podcast. I'm Susan Guthrie, your host, and today I have a wonderful guest and an exciting topic for you all. And I know this because I was just on her podcast. And it was such an amazing experience. I had such a wonderful time talking to her, and I learned new things from her in that podcast on her topic of expertise, or one of her topics of expertise. So I immediately, in the middle of her podcast, asked her to come on this podcast to help all of you. So let me tell you a little bit about our guest today, Hilary DeCesare. I'm very happy you're here, Hilary. Thank you so much for joining us.
So amazing to be here, because when we first started talking, it was like, blah, 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 we just had so much to say. So I love the idea that we get a, part two.
And that's it exactly. You know how you can sometimes just flip on that screen and be able to talk to someone as if you've known them forever. You are one of those people. And I know that that will be helpful to my listeners, because your particular topic of expertise is something that I think everyone who's listening is going to be facing or has faced as they either are moving through divorce or into, my favorite topic, the beyond of divorce. So just a little bit about Hilary. She is an award-winning entrepreneur and transformational coach, and she's the CEO of, I love this name, and it's going to give you a hint on what we're talking about, the ReLaunch Co. She's a featured speaker in the Silicon Valley, where she is right now, but not for much longer. She speaks at conferences nationwide. And here's a great phrase for y'all. She's a relentless philanthropist. It's wonderful. And her podcast is called the Silver Lined Relaunch Podcast. And that is what we're talking about today. We are talking about the fact that your divorce is the perfect time for a relaunch. So again, Hilary, I very much appreciate you are about to move. You are packing up one house. You are a million different things. You have a masterclass about to start, and you took time today to come sit with us. So thank you so much.
I love it. And I love being here with you.
Well, thank you. And, this idea of a relaunch, I told you just before we started, because of course we chattered away before we got started taping. I just had Alyssa Panitz, the divorce journalist, on the podcast. And, her episode, she had being a journalist, she had a million sound bites in that episode. But one of them that really resonated with people was that divorce is like a do-over, and who doesn't love a do-over? And there's something about a relaunch that kind of feels like a do-over too, don't you think?
Well, and I think that there are so many relaunches that we go through, that divorce is one of the most significant, but there's also changing of your career, or moving out of a area, right, into a different area, or relaunching after a pandemic. I mean, there's just, you name it, health relaunches. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So it is an opportunity to have a restart. When you get divorced, when you have that, finality, and you have to, kind of, you're stuck, what we call in the mid zone, right? You're kind of like, you have a choice. You can continue to be thinking about the past, or you can literally put that stake in the ground and say, all right, it's time. It's time for me to move forward. And now, how do I best do that? For the kids, or for yourself, or for your family, or your friends? How do I best do it, especially for me?
Well, that actually points out so many of the questions and the feelings that I've personally had at those transitional moments in life. My own divorce, my moving around the country, changes in my career. And one of the things that I think will impact people who are listening, who are usually, my listeners are at that point of divorce, is that there's sometimes it can feel overwhelming, this concept of relaunch, right? It feels like, well, sure, everyone keeps telling me, including Susan, who says it all the time, that divorce is this opportunity. But what if I don't know what I want to do, or how do I know? How do I know how to relaunch? What do you tell people? Because you must get people coming to you all the time with the name of your podcast and your programs and your website.
Well, here's the best part. I've never had anyone come to me and say, I want to stay stuck. I want to stay in the misery of all of this ever, which is great. So then we have to talk about this concept of fail forward, which I actually am not a proponent, because when you fail forward or fall forward, you get bruised, you get, injured. You don't want that. Instead, we want to relaunch and fail and actually fail upwards, right? Because what we're ultimately going for is the next chapter. And you specifically have a choice that you can either have the next chapter be something positive or something negative. And that's the greatest part. But guess what? You can't have both. You can't have something positive and negative at the same time. It's not possible. So if you have negative thoughts, you can't have positive thoughts. So my attitude is, at this point, knowing life is short, knowing that, for a majority of us, we are in the mid zone. We're in this, middle stage of our life. And whether that's, 30 plus or 40 or 50, it's go time. Like, this is it. Right? I mean,
Yeah.
we gotta get this down. We got, like, the rules of engagement now are, significant. And so when you talk about a relaunch, it's not that, hey, yeah, I get it. And I went through a very challenging divorce, but I also made the decision through utilizing what I call the relaunch effect to say, you know what? I could have a horrible divorce, or I could have B, the great divorce. And I'm like literally the poster child for the great divorce, and how you can make it a top priority to be able to get there.
So I like that. I think I need to know a little bit more about the great divorce. How do you define a great divorce?
So I have 3 kids.
Hmm.
And at the time when I was going through separation, my kids were, 3 under the age of 7.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was running a business. I was, I had been in the corporate world for 10 years, decided that, now is the time I need to relaunch my business. I need to relaunch. It was kind of this crazy, like, really? I also got melanoma and had to deal with that. So I was relaunching my health, and it was all coming at me. Have you ever had those times where it's just like, you kind of throw your arms up and you're like, really? I'm going to have another relaunch on top of already my major relaunches. Like, is it possible? Can I really do this? I mean, it was coming at me fast. I was like dodging. I don't want that one. I don't want this one. But when I started to think about what was most important, was, how could I be the best mom to these kids? How could I give myself an opportunity for growth, for the grace of just like, okay, people go through this. This is, I'm not the only one going through this. And how could I leverage what I've learned to bring in a better future? And so when I talk about a great divorce, and how do I maintain my own dignity with my ex-husband so that I actually feel like, you know what? I have many times patted myself on the back and said, you know what? I did a really good job. But there was a key element, and it is this. If there is one thing that I have continued to lean into, it's you have to take 100% responsibility. And this whole concept, and I know everyone's heard of it, but I went through the whole blame, shame, and now you got to own the game. And the way I looked at it is, I first was like blaming. I'm like, oh, he did this and he did that. And, it was all this in the head. I was just operating 100% in the head. And then through my heart, I was like, I was shamed by like, oh my God, I couldn't make my marriage work. And I've got 3 little kids, and that's just, so wrong. And I was a product of divorce. And I'm like, I promise I'd never do this and all these things. And so I had a lot of shame there. But then it clicked, and I'm like, all right, if you think about being at that level of an athlete and in the game, and I'm not talking about like, playing games, I'm talking about like being in the
Yeah.
game. It starts with internal. It's an internal mindset. It's an internal, like, energy, right? So instead of, you talk about like, the people you surround yourself through, right? With, and the people that are going to inspire. And, it's all about like, be there at that level. And I wasn't playing at that level. I was playing at the, all about like, the blame, the shame. And I
Yeah.
needed to kind of move from the heart, move to the head, and then move to the higher self, understanding universal principles, understanding what they could do and help me be a better mom, better CEO, better person to myself.
If there were ever a mic drop moment in the middle of a podcast, that was it. The blame, the shame, and then the owning the game is so critical to. I like that you call it a great divorce. It's really the key to a successful divorce, if you want to call it that, a good divorce, a happy divorce. Someone called it an excellent divorce. I think it is really the key to everything, and it strikes me that in that there has to be something that carries over then into a successful relaunch. Is there something about owning it that carries over?
Well, so when you really think of the 3 H's, the heart to the head to the higher self, so many of us operate in the head, right? We're all in our head. It's all about me, like what happened? Why did this happen? It's not about kind of like, how are you going to move out of the head, right? You're just in
Right.
your head, you're in that space. And so when you start to lean into the heart, the emotions, and not the emotions of shame, which is, if you look at the frequency of shame is low. It's like 30. Whereas the frequency of love is around, the mid 500s. And when you're looking at operating in that, like, yeah, that lowest zone, that's what you're going to attract. That's what's going to come your way, because like attracts like. So, what I like to do is start to have you operate from what level of, oh my God, it's a heart's level. What level do you want to operate on? And so when you start to look at the heart and you start to say, all right, I'm going to elevate my heart's energy. I'm going to go into, maybe you're not where, and this was me. Gurus out there were sitting there saying, love yourself, love your life, love your relationships.
Like,
I was so far from that. And it really like, it irritated me. I'm like, that's a bunch of BS. I can't do that, because I wasn't even at the point where I liked myself. So I did something that I thought, okay, I can't jump from that shame to love in one step. I can't. But I can do it incrementally. I can first, go to that next step, and then next small, incremental. And over time, I built myself up. And once you're doing that, once you're going from the shame to, that higher level, and you're not self-sabotaging yourself, not like beating yourself up daily, which was what I was doing daily,
sure.
you end up realizing that it is a game that you're playing in your head. And so you really need to start focusing on your limiting beliefs versus the ones that are good and the ones that are bad, and where did they come from and where did they start. And we talk about the relaunch effect, and it's a 7 step. And the first step is always releasing. And in order to release out of that head state, You have to be able to go back and accept, as I said, what was your responsibility there? Like, what did you do? What were you contributing to? Because it's never, never, ever, as long as I have spoken to thousands of people, it's never just one person's fault. So once you realize that, all right, I'm gonna go with this release. I'm gonna trust Hilary. I'm gonna like say, okay, we have steps that go into that. But then you are at the point where you can now go into that higher self. And a lot of times people are, they say, well, what about the higher self? Well, when you really think about the higher self and you look at all these like universal, I don't call them laws because a law seems so like, narrow minded. I call them principles because they're, everything has like a little bit of like give and take, right? So when you talk about the law of cause and effect, it's really this concept of the principles of law of cause and effect. It's the principles around what you give, you get back. It's the principles of the law of attraction and this idea that, again, how you put out comes back to you, the type of goodness you're giving. And then it goes into, and there's so many of these that we, law of reciprocity. Instead, it's the principles, right? And when you
Mhm.
start to operate from the heart to the head to the higher self, and you capitalize on all three, like you're not just leaning into one, like, oh, this is so overwhelming, head. You start to focus on like, I can't just go into love, 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 too much heart. You have to
Right.
start to realize it's a process, it's a journey. This was not something that happened to me overnight. But now that I have built up the three H's within me, no matter what relaunch. And again, I just lost my mom a year ago to, cancer suddenly. And I thought she was going to live well past, 100, because that's what the women in the family did. So,
Right.
I'm like, what the heck? Or the fact that, one of my kids gets sick and, we have to start doing all these tests. Or the fact that, it ended up with one of my companies that one of the board members ended up doing a Ponzi scheme, and he did it with our company, ended up in federal prison for 3 years. I mean, there's always going to be something. That's what life is all about. But it's how you handle it, how you grow, how you truly like master the game, that you can then look and say, all right, and I call it the two G's. And I'm going to walk you through this, the two G's that lead to the three G's, which is the grace. You've got grace. You have this like ability to say, you know what, I've done a good job. You got the grit to keep moving on. Like, you know what, you do not need to be defined by what happened. And then you've got your G zone, your G zone. And that G zone is truly your genius, your great zone, your gratitude zone. It's like the place that we need to be spending more time in.
Yeah, well, and there's so much in what you just said there that just speaks to every experience of divorce that I've been through or been through with other people. And there's, that time in your head. There's so much time in your head. We're all there all the time anyway, but when you're going through a transition like divorce, a difficult transition, there's so much time spent up in there, and there's so much there's well, gosh, I mean, the shame, but there's just the blame, the it's somebody else's fault, I didn't do this, they did this. And there's none of that ability to look to the word you use that really jumped out for me, because it's been so transformational in my life, is gratitude. Gratitude changed everything for me, even in actually mostly in times of difficulty. Because if you can look at what you're grateful for in those moments of difficulty, obviously you can realize how much you do have, not be focused on what you don't have. But, how does someone, because I know that there's someone listening right now to this podcast who is stuck in that, well, that all sounds great, but how do I actually do it? What is the very first thing you would tell that person to do?
So when you have that, that all sounds great. That's good for her, won't work for me. you have to really be thinking about you're all in your head. That's you're spending 99%, which means that those are stories you're telling yourself that I can't have that happen. And my answer is always this: the universe does not differentiate between you and me. We're all one and the same. It's the way we approach when we are at rock bottom that matters. It's when we're at that level, whether it's the burnout zone, I just don't have it in me anymore. This seems like it always happens to me. You know, when you're thinking about that and you're ruminating and it's getting more and more and more intense. I had this amazing coach who used to say repeatedly, 10 times, a day, he would say, you are not your thoughts, you're the thinker of your thoughts. You are not your thoughts, you're the thinker of your thoughts. And this is where I come in, it's like being a human being, we are truly blessed that we can change our thoughts, and the thought today can become your reality tomorrow. But what you have to be aware of is that willpower won't get you there. You trying to push through and say, I'm just going to think, I'm going to be like thinking thoughts every day, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. Unfortunately, because of your neuroplasticity in your brain, and I've studied this for years, and I have a psych degree, and I've taken, extensive additional classes in neuropsychology. What you have to be able to realize is that in order to have a new thought process really take place, I call it bugs, belief underground surfacing, your bugs, these things that are holding you back, these bugs that, isn't it true that they show up at the most inopportune times?
Oh
They
yeah.
show up, those damn bugs, like, I can't do that. I'm not good enough. Ugh, I'm never going to find ... And so what we want to do is a process called the belief blaster. And the first step in a belief blaster is you actually write down what you think that belief is. What are you saying that's not serving you and not allowing you to move forward? You just write it down. You write it down and you say, oh, when have I seen this in my life where, I'm not good enough, or I'm not somebody that can do that. You just write these thoughts down. You just put them down. I'm not talking about like, endless processes. But then the second part, and there's 5 parts, we'll only talk about a couple right now. The second part is when you start to actually like say what you're saying, but then do the opposite. So where have you been able to see in your life the opposite for you, right? It hasn't
Right.
happened all the time, which means it's not factual. And factual means it is 100% of the time true. My name is Hilary is a fact. And right now, the sun will come up tomorrow, factual, right?
Yes,
Right? In
we hope
our
so.
world. We hope so. We hope so. But that's what you have to start to be able to do and really take it through. And by the way, you talk about, affirmations and saying things positive. Did you know that it takes your brain 67 days for something continuously every day for you to hear it to create a new neural highway around that thought? So it is like, remember I talked about this whole idea of, owning the game, owning your game. It is a process that is going to take work. I'm not telling you that what I went through and how I'm here today happened overnight. No, it happened. It took me years and years and years to kind of put it all together. But what I'm giving you now is this ability to fast track yourself. You're at Disneyland and you're going to be going on that ride and you don't have to wait in line, all those, you can go right to the front. That's what we're doing here so that you can get into owning the game sooner than later.
I love the fast lane aspect of it. I feel like I have the little transponder on my car, and I just got to go. In Chicago, it's a big deal to be able to get into the express lanes during rush hour. So, and I like that because The 67 days, I think, is a significant thing for people to understand. Not necessarily that it's 60, but 7 days, but that change does not happen in anything overnight. And positive change takes that time. There's a faith that needs to be involved in all of this too. And this is something that I see on my show so often, and that I hear from listeners, is when they see someone like you who has said, I went through a difficult divorce. I've been through my mother's passing in the past year, a child's illness, moving, the Ponzi scheme, which is a whole new, level of difficulty, right?
Mm.
And look at you. You're sitting there, you've relaunched successfully over and over again. People know, or do know out there, it can happen. It will happen. The most powerful transformational tool you have is up in your head and in your heart, and you took it to the higher spirit, power, high spirituality. It will happen. And there's that faith that you need to have as well. But I'm also thinking that I know you have a master class coming out. Is that around relaunching?
So what we've done is we have taken this concept of foundation, the foundation of business, the foundation of your relationships, and the foundation of self. And we have woven it into this free masterclass, but it's primarily driven around business, right? This is a business masterclass. And then in it, because everything, you've heard me say this over and over, everything is interrelated. And so we know that what happens, especially after divorce, is, you throw yourself into like, I need to create, I need to make money, I need, a relaunch to revenue, right?
Right. Yeah.
Relaunch to revenue, baby. That's what we're
Yeah.
talking about now. And so whether you have a business or whether you are launching, so whether relaunching a business or launching a business, there is foundational elements to it. And that is what we focus on, because too many people, you're going along, you're building your business, and then you stall out. And then all of a sudden it's like, why isn't this working? And usually there's some type of crack in the foundation. And so we want to make sure that you are understanding. And by the way, I've taken people through what I teach in the masterclass that have MBAs from some of the top schools in the country. And they say after, like, oh my God, I had no idea. I've never known this. And I've never had it taught the way we teach it. And that's the key. It's like the concept of the 3 H's, the head to the heart, the heart to the head to the higher self. When you focus in just one area, I don't want to just give you, hey, here are the tactical tips that you can take away to, create your best business. That's not it. Because that's great. You're going to have a successful business, but you're miserable.
Right.
Or you're alone, or you want to go out there and you want to find that next great relationship. I want to set you up for success. And so the master class is really focused on business first and foremost. Because let's get, what does Oprah say? That her number one fear is to be a bag lady, or she's going to be a bag lady. I mean, come on. But
they're going to be Birkin bagged.
Yeah, they're going to be a Birkin bag. But she's going to be a bag lady and she's going to have no money. And that, I know, is one of what you talked about, faith. What's the opposite of faith? Fear.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that fear. And so many women, and I know it because I was one, thinks about like the financial situation you're in. So I start there and then I build you up so that you literally are able to have this reset, this restart of your life.
It's so wonderful and that's so true. I say all the time, there are a million emotions during divorce, all of them negative for the most part for people experiencing what I would call the traditional divorce process. But the number one emotion is fear. It's fear of not having enough, whether it be money, time with your children, love, acceptance, it's all of that. And that one of the things I think is most powerful about the message of my show, or I hope is that you can have faith and hope, because look at all of the people, almost everyone, you included, who's come on my show, me included as well, uh, has been through a divorce, has been through difficult times in life. You're not going to find someone out there who's had a charmed life. Everyone's gone through some sort of difficulty and has managed. Some people do well and manage to transition well and relaunch, and other people sort of stay in that place of fear and blame. And, I've met people, sadly, when you're a divorce attorney, I think it's like doctors. When you go to a cocktail party and you're a doctor, people want to tell you about the pain in their elbow. When you're a divorce attorney and you go to a cocktail party, everyone wants to tell you about their divorce. And I've heard a million stories at parties and different events, but the saddest ones are when they tell you the story and then they tell you at the end of the story that the divorce happened 10 years ago and
Mm,
they're still in it to that extent. And there's never been a relaunch, you know.
no. I sit here and I say, instead of a midlife crisis, have a midlife relaunch, because there is, a divorce with dignity. Like, come on, there is, and yeah, we're not taught how to do it. We're not, and there's struggles, yes, but they're also absolutely 100%. I'm sitting here that I would never be with the man I'm with today, my second husband, had I not decided to change literally the game and show up differently and start to get myself in tip top shape to play that game, my game, the game that I really ultimately wanted, which was I wanted to bring another incredible man into my life. I wanted to have my kids in a great place with a stepdad. These were things that I was like, this is what I want, and this is what I'm going to put out there. So you talk about like law of attraction, you talk about, cause and effect,
Yeah.
reciprocity, law of giving. I mean, all of this, yes. And it 100% can happen to everybody listening, but you got to take the first step. You got to take the first step and say, I am willing and able to relaunch right now. I want to do this.
And it's so worth the journey, everyone. So if people want to relaunch with you, how can they get in touch with you, Hilary?
They want to relaunch with the ReLaunch Co. and me. That would be really awesome, because we have done it with thousands of people, and it's a really unique process. You can go to therelaunchco.com. So www.therelaunchco.com, and you can listen to the blog, our podcast, or you could read blogs, listen to our podcast. You can sign up for the masterclass. And you can just get involved. That's part of, what the vibe is with your tribe. And our tribe is really this collective, this group that I don't ever say like-minded, because that I think is bad news, because that means that you're staying where you are in this place. Instead, it's like energy. I want you to be a part of something much bigger.
It's a wonderful opportunity, everyone. And I think you just got a big dose of that energy. You've met Hilary. Just imagine an entire community of Hilarys. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing the hope of a relaunch and the promise of a relaunch, because as you said, it's there for everyone. You have to want it. But you are, living proof yourself. I hope I am a little bit, and everyone out there, you can relaunch. It's Life is, as I always say, life is better on the other side. Have that faith. So thank you so much, Hilary.
Susan, thanks so much for letting me be here.